Three. Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Kier, and joining me today is my co-host Austin Davidson.
Hello.
It has been a long layoff for us. It's been almost a full month since our last episode, getting busy with the end of the school year and the beginning of our summer with a lot of work, but there hasn't been too much news to talk about as far as the Pittsburgh Steelers and the NFL goes. It's the longest part of the off season as we look forward to training camp, which will be starting at the end of next month. So we're right in the early portion of June right now, and late July is when training camps start. For now, however, we just have mostly mini camps and organized team activities, which I should remind people are not mandatory at this point. So if players aren't showing up, it's sometimes a red flag, but usually the media is going to talk about it because it's the only thing to talk about. I mean, there's not much going on in these mini camps other than, say, a quarterback is working with the new receiver or the rookies are learning more about the playbook. So, not too much to talk about, but we're going to try to get to some news here that's going on because there has been some things going on with the Steelers since we last met. So, first and foremost, longtime long snapper Greg Warren was released about a week after our last episode due to a failed physical. He had been the Steelers' long snapper since his rookie season in 2005. This meaning that James Harrison and Ben Roethlisberger are now the only remaining holdovers from the Super Bowl 40 roster that won a championship back in 2005. Warren was, in a word, the consummate professional, someone who always did his job well. How will you remember his time with the Steelers?
Uh, as a long snapper, it's kind of a loveless job, you know? Like, you don't really think about it. It just kind of happens. I think you said it several times that you don't really hear about a long snapper until they mess up, until they cause a safety, until they miss a tackle on special teams. You don't really hear about them. What I will remember is actually really only from last season. He recovered a fumble, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Or he forced it. Oh, I can't remember now. He did something with a fumble last year, and that's as much as I could ask for from a long snapper. So, have a good time, Greg Warren. How about you?
Well, as is the case with long snappers, like you just touched on, and as we have for most of this offseason since the drafting of Colin Holba, you don't really think about long snappers when they're performing well. I'd say the most memorable thing about Warren, aside from the fact that he won 2 Super Bowls with the Steelers, was a game against the New York Giants in 2008 that I vividly remember. He was injured and eventually lost for the season in this game, but the backup long snapper was actually James Harrison, and he proceeded to step in as the long snapper and snap the ball far over the punter's head. There's got to be a video of it on YouTube somewhere. He snaps it over the head of punter Mitch Berger, who at the time had already pulled his hamstring pretty badly. So Mitch was not having a good time running after that ball, and it rolled out of the back of the end zone for a safety, which ended up leading to the Giants, who scored the game-winning touchdown later in that game. So it's just another example of how long snappers are kind of unsung heroes who are not really recognized for the good work that they do, but they are recognized when they do screw up. So that is something to keep in mind with long snappers, but Warren is someone who always did his job well, and that's something that he's probably not going to be missed too much in the fact that people don't really care about long snappers, but you have to appreciate the work that he put in for the past almost 15 years now, so I think 12, 13 years now. So, moving from one failed physical to the next, the Steelers also released tight end Ladarius Green due to a failed physical. He was signed to a 4-year, $20 million deal last offseason, and now that he has been released, his Steelers career is over, and with those totals come 18 catches, 304 yards, 1 touchdown, and just 6 games played this season. The Steelers are going to save $2.65 million in salary cap savings by cutting him, but they're also losing $3.56 million in dead money. What is there to say about what could very well be one of the worst free agent signings in Steelers history, certainly in recent Steelers history?
he's not the Ferrari Roethlisberger hoped, or it's more like he didn't ever become not impounded, because when he was first signed, Roethlisberger said he was like an impounded Ferrari, then he was just looking through the fence. It's basically like Roethlisberger got one ride in it for one game, like that was it. And obviously Ladarius Green had the biggest game of his career, one of the games, and that was it. He went straight back to the impound lot. There is not much to say about Ladarius Green at all. There was a lot of hype surrounding him. There was a lot of hope, and it just kind of came crashing down. He got a big deal. It's like one of the first big free agent signings in a while. This it wasn't even that big. It was just it was cool to see, and then it just didn't work out. So, what do you have to say about Ladarius Green?
Well, you're absolutely right. It was a very interesting signing, something that a lot of people were very excited about. I remember I was pretty excited hearing about how, oh, this guy is not going to be Heath Miller. We all knew that, but the potential for him to be kind of a field stretching, seam cutting tight end was something that was intriguing to a lot of Steelers fans, because as much of the NFL had gone from the typical blocking, big tight end, the rest of the NFL was moving to a more athletic receiving like tight end, while the Steelers had Heath Miller, who was still more of a do-it-all guy. We had never had someone like I guess like a poor man's, what's his name? Jimmy Graham. I'm blanking. It's at the off season here, but the Steelers had never had someone like that who could be that kind of a difference maker. And for one game, like you said, he had the game of his life, a 100-yard game, the first of his career. He had a touchdown. He was really impactful in that game. And outside of that, he had 3 other memorable catches throughout the year. He had 2 against the Colts, and I believe that was his first meaningful playing time. He caught 2 long passes in that game, and he also caught a pass in the game against the Cincinnati Bengals that essentially iced that game, but he also suffered the injury that has since ended his Steelers career when he got knocked out converting a late third down. Green was definitely a disappointing signing. Like we said, there was a lot of hope and hype surrounding him, and there were times we did get to see a little bit of what he could have been, but the fact of the matter is the Steelers scouts really failed them by not knowing enough about Green's troublesome injury history. And Green, it's always going to be a question of what could have been with him. And now it's leaving the Steelers quite handicapped at the tight end position, as Jesse James is really the only player who... Jesse James is really the only proven commodity at tight end who can both block and catch. So that's something to definitely be concerned with going forward. Moving on now, back to the issue of long snapping. The Steelers' drafting of Colin Holba showed that the Steelers were pretty well aware that Greg Warren had a chance of not being able to play anymore, but at the same time, the Steelers were clearly not aware that Ladarius Green was in a pretty similar situation. A beat writer for the San Diego Chargers talked about his concussion history on radio a couple months ago, and he was talking about how there were some big red flags that were pretty apparent before his signings. The Steelers did make a big error here, case in point with the release of Green, but how did they move forward at tight end here? They did not draft one this year.
Well, Jesse James has flashed being good, but never consistently. I think what happens is the Steelers going into the season, and this is their weakest position. I think that's just what they had to accept, to what they had to deal with. There's really nothing they could do. They're not a team known to make trades, and whatever is left in free agency isn't worth it when they could just trust their luck in an undrafted free agent. So that's what I think the plan is. I think their plan is to hope for Jesse James and an undrafted free agent to show something. What do you think of their plan?
Well, it's definitely going to have to be a by-committee approach, kind of like what they did a lot of last season. Jesse James is someone who you'd be comfortable with as a number 2 tight end, but you're not really sure if you'd want him to have a full workload as the number 1 guy. But he's going to have to be that. And there's also some hope with the undrafted free agents like Fazan Odom from Fordham and Scott Orndorff from Pitt. There's some hope that they could be good finds, but I find it hard to believe that they're going to be significant contributors on the offense this year. And with the release of Green, the tight end position becomes really the only big hole on the Steelers offense, and it's gonna be interesting to see how many four wide receiver sets the Steelers use, because the tight end has always been a huge part of the Steelers offense, and now this year it might be the first time that this might not be the case. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that moving forward. Moving on, the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is the big news coming out of OTAs, have had several potential starters still unsigned or unhappy with their current contract situations. This includes Ross Cockrell and Alejandro Villanueva, who are both exclusive rights free agents. Just so fans know what that is when their contract expires before they have reached, I believe it's 3 years of service time. So rookies don't usually become exclusive rights free agents because when their contracts expires, they go right to restricted free agents. They skip the exclusive rights. So Cockrell and Villanueva are both exclusive rights. Le'Veon Bell has the franchise tag and is awaiting a long-term deal. And I don't know if this is still true, but at the time, T.J. Watt was still unsigned, the Steelers' only draft pick yet to be signed. What do you make of these situations? Why don't we start with Ross Cockrell, the cornerback, starter last year? What are your thoughts about his situation and if you think a deal is going to get done?
Cockrell isn't that important. I think a deal is going to get done. I like how it feels. I know it's taking a while, but he's voiced his love for Pittsburgh and how he wants to stay there. It's just, I think he's going to stay. I think that's a lock that it's going to happen. What do you think about Cockrell's deal?
I agree. I think it's going to happen. I mean, these exclusive rights free agents basically either sign the contract or find a better deal, but they basically have to play for Pittsburgh or nobody. So I think he's going to play, but I think Cockrell is not too happy with the Steelers because they drafted two more cornerbacks this year. And in several interviews over the past couple months, he hasn't seemed very happy. Now, that could change with a short-term deal or something, but I suspect that Cockrell is going to get signed, but I don't know if he's going to be very happy to be here much longer. So I suspect if a deal gets done, he won't be staying here longer than he has to. Next, the Steelers have another starter in Alejandro Villanueva. The starting left tackle, who is yet to be signed. He's probably been the most well-covered story out of Steelers training camp, mini camp and OTAs the last couple of weeks. Right now, on that exclusive rights contract, he would be making $615,000. Just for perspective, Gerald Hawkins, his backup, makes about $1 million more than him. So you can be sure Villanueva is not very happy about that. I think I read somewhere today that he is the 54th highest paid tackle in the NFL. And that's something that he really doesn't deserve after A, everything he's done for this country, and B, everything he did just last year in his efforts as a player to expand in his abilities. So what do you make of that particular situation?
All right, Villanueva's, I'm honestly not that worried about it. It's just not something that I really care about. No offense to Villanueva. I love him. I think he's done a lot for the team, but it's just he's in a position where he wouldn't be the biggest loss in the world. If he decided he didn't want to play for the year because he didn't get a deal, we've got Gerald Hawkins as well as other backups that can play tackle, like Chris Hubbard. It's just not worrying to me. I mean, I hope the deal gets done. I hope he plays, but it's just not it's not that important to me. I would like to see it because I like him as a person, and I like what he's done for the team. But this is the Steelers' probably most heavy depth position, so him not playing is not a concern to me. What do you think?
Yeah, when you're talking about this particular situation, of all the contract situations, this is the one the Steelers have absolutely the most leverage in, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, easily. With all the backups.
I mean, Villanueva, the Steelers have guys, yeah, they probably don't want, B.J. Finney or Chris Hubbard playing there long term, but Gerald Hawkins seems to be a guy that they're very confident could play there. And Villanueva's only an exclusive rights free agent, but I believe he's 28 years old, so as far as he goes, the time for him to make money is now. We all know how short NFL careers usually last, and you want to maximize that ability to make money. And the problem is the Steelers really shouldn't have to shell out a ton of money for him because they don't need to. So I think a deal is going to get done, but I suspect it's going to be something short where he does get paid, but I'd be shocked if it's for anything more than 2 years because I think it's quite possible if Gerald Hawkins doesn't take his job this year, he might next year. And I hate to say it because Villanueva is one of the most inspiring players on the Steelers, and he's one of the probably the best human beings in the NFL. I don't know if he has a long future remaining in Pittsburgh, but that's something that we can get to in more detail at another time. Uh, Two different situations we have left. Le'Veon Bell got the franchise tag applied to him several months ago. There's still some time left to get a long term deal done, but are you concerned that there hasn't been one done yet?
Uh, honestly think Le'Veon Bell is the most concerning out of the four. It's just like it's taking an awful long time to sign a proven player, arguably the best back in the league, to a deal. He's also voiced how he hasn't liked things in the city of Pittsburgh. Of course, it's like mostly like mundane things like Pittsburgh traffic and the people, but stuff like that factors into what makes you want to leave a place. I mean, it's not all just about the job. It's just there's a lot of things that freak me out about this, and I'm probably on edge for no reason, but I don't like it. I also look at this is going to sound the most ridiculous. I'm going to sound like Skip Bayless, but the drafting of James Conner is not. It didn't help. It didn't help this situation. And I don't expect James Conner to be a number one running back, but just bringing in another running back at that high of a round, it doesn't look good. When Bell was drafted in the second, so there's just a bunch of bad things happening in my mind for this. The worst case scenario. I would like this deal to get done quickly. What do you think?
Well, let me put it this way: with the Steelers' history of paying players, or more so not paying their players and letting them walk. If you were to tell me the Steelers signed Le'Veon Bell to a long term extension before the start of the year, I wouldn't be surprised. If you also told me that he wasn't signed and he eventually became a free agent at the end of this year, I also would not be surprised at that either. Um, the Steelers typically, with players like Bell who have gotten into trouble before and tend to do things like, yes, I'm not saying Le'Veon Bell's holding out, but when they display tendencies of doing things like that, or might be getting ready to earn some big time money, the Steelers don't usually break the bank for those kinds of players, and usually that ends up being the right move. I think this is a little bit of a different scenario because of just how versatile Bell is and how much he plays. Like with good backs, you usually see them play a lot, but even they need to take a rest. Bell is so different from that. He can do all those things and rarely has to come out at all. He is quite a unique player for sure, and losing him would definitely be concerning. But the other thing is when you draft Connor as high as you did, it's made me wonder a little bit if the Steelers think that he actually could be a starting caliber running back in the future. Now, that's a debate we could have for another time. I don't know if he ever can be or will be, but the drafting of Connor might be a bit of a red flag as far as how long Le'Veon Bell might have left in Pittsburgh. So I don't know. We'll see about that. I do, of course, hope a deal gets done, but I'm not as confident that a deal is going to get done now as I was before the draft. So finally, the Steelers have number one draft pick T.J. Watt yet to be signed. I don't believe he has been signed, has he, Austin?
Not that I've seen, no.
No. So what's going on here? There's a rookie cap basically as to how much rookie draft picks can make in a given contract for their first contract. What could possibly be holding this up?
I honestly think this is just what the Steelers do. I went to go look back when I was reviewing this to see when Artie Burns was signed. I couldn't find it for some reason on Google, but what I did find was an article saying how come Artie Burns is yet to be signed. And that came out on June 7th, 2016. And today is June 9th, 2017, and we haven't signed our first round pick. So I'm assuming at this point last year, Artie Burns wasn't signed either. So it's really not that big of a deal. I feel like the Steelers always do it. They're one of the last teams to sign their first round draft pick. I'm not sure why they do it. It's just weird, I guess. They want to wait. They want to see what he's doing. Maybe see a few practices with him. But I don't have a big concern at this point. It just kind of sucks waiting for it to happen. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't really have much to say on this particular issue. The good news is that he has been attending practices, and he has looked pretty good so far. Yes, a little undersized, but that's also been expected. He will be getting a lot of playing time this year. As we all know, there isn't much depth at the outside linebacker position. So, if we're a month later and he's not signed right before training camp, that's something to be concerned about. But as long as he's still participating, even though he's not signed, that's his problem. If he hasn't signed it yet, or I guess maybe it's a Steelers problem too. But I'm sure this is gonna get done at some point. It's either you play or you don't. It's kind of like the Joey Bosa situation. I really don't see T.J. Watt doing that. So that's really all I have to say for that. So moving on to NFL news, there isn't too much to talk about, but the New York Jets seem to be in the process of tanking. Austin, you want to take this one away?
Yeah, oh, yeah. The Jets are my guess for the number one draft pick in the 2018 draft. I just want to talk about one of the people the Jets lost this offseason that didn't sign. They lost Willie Cullen to retirement, Darrelle Revis, Calvin Pryor, Nick Mangold, Brandon Marshall, Ryan Clady, Nick Folk, and 2 quarterbacks. And all they gained, Josh McCown, Morris Claiborne, Demario Davis, former Steeler Kelvin Beachum, and now cut Quentin Patton. They signed Quentin Patton in March, and he got cut like 3 days ago or 2 days ago now. So he's gone too. It just feels like this roster is just talentless. They don't have a superstar. Sure, their defensive line has got some good guys on it, like Sheldon Richardson and Leonard Williams, but let me take a break right there for a second. Sheldon Richardson, they've been trying to get rid of for like the past 3 years. He's just a bad locker room to have, and teams don't want him. He's getting older. He's just bad. But anyway, back to the point. Even those guys aren't superstar defensive linemen like Chandler Jones, J.J. Watt, Ezekiel Anza, people like that. Their roster, other than that, is rather talentless, and I predict this team to only get 1 win all of next season. It's a really sad-looking team. And quoting Mark Sessler, an NFL analyst, off of Twitter, because I thought it was the funniest and it captured it best. They are pointing the nose of the plane toward planet Earth at 500 miles per hour. What do you think of this Jets in the offseason?
Well, that sums it up pretty well, don't you think? This franchise has officially reached, in my opinion, the lowest tier of NFL teams. We're talking about organizations that are just laughing stocks that typically don't compete and haven't competed for a long time. So we're talking about teams like the Browns and the Jaguars, for the most part the Lions, excluding the last few years. Right now, the Chicago Bears and San Francisco 49ers as well. So since the Jets lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 2011 AFC Championship game, do you remember that game, Austin?
Sort of, kind of.
It was a long time ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, like 2010, right?
Yep. It's January of 2011. So point being, that feels like a long time ago, right?
Yeah, 6 years.
Since that time, the Jets have a single winning season. And that, as I'm sure you remember, as all of Steelers Nation remembers, that was in 2015 where they had a playoff spot essentially locked away. All they had to do was beat the lowly Buffalo Bills, and they could not do that. And they gave the Steelers an opening, and the Steelers took it and made their way into the playoffs that year. The Jets have not come close to any sort of playoff success or the playoffs in general since 2011, minus 2015. And like you mentioned, they've had good defensive talent at times, but they've never been able to put anything together, and the quarterback position has been a mess for so long now. The gutting of this roster doesn't really make sense to me, considering how bad they already were. And if I'm a fan of this team, I'm really questioning their management right now. They've only made the playoffs twice in the past 10 years, and it appears that it's going to be a long time before they sniff the playoffs again. And, of course, another AFC East team that is not in New England is once more a doormat. So that's pretty frustrating. But we can talk about how bad the AFC East is another time. So something else we wanted to talk about just to kind of change things up, something for us to talk about. we wanted to talk about our early roster predictions for the final 53-man roster. So Austin and I went position by position. We kept a list of the guys we thought were going to make the team, and we had a list of guys at each position and a number for each. So, Austin, you and I started with quarterback. I think this is pretty straightforward, don't you think?
Yeah, it's Ben Jones and Dobbs. There's really no explanation needed. It's really the only quarterbacks that have a chance at making it. Obviously, Dobbs is a rookie. Jones just got his deal, and he's really cheap for a backup. And he's probably going to help Dobbs ease into the backup role. And, yeah, the Steelers aren't cutting Ben Roethlisberger anytime soon. So, you have anything to say?
No, I mean, obviously, this is the quarterback list that we're going to be having probably for the next couple of years. Jones has a 2-year deal. Dobbs is probably the future backup to Jones, so we can expect him to be around for a while. And Roethlisberger is going to be around at least this year, maybe next year, maybe the year after. We don't know how much longer he's going to be around, so the Steelers are in win-now mode. And the only reason we'll see anybody different is because of injury, so let's hope these are the guys we see going all year. Moving next, we have running backs, so this includes halfbacks and fullbacks. Austin and I once again had the exact same list of players here. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, sure. We have Bell, Connor, Davis, and Nix. And for me, the hardest one was picking Davis or Toussaint because they're both really there for the same reason. They're both there for special teams help. And Davis has had a better time in other teams on special teams. So that's what won him the job here over Toussaint. Because Toussaint is kind of a slower running back. He wasn't really good for returns, in my opinion. And Davis is he's had touchdowns on punt returns and kick returns. He's had production. He's done well. So I think he beats out Toussaint here. And, I mean, everyone else is basically a lock. Roosevelt Nix is the fullback. Connor's a rookie. If they cut him, oh, my God. I'm just imagining the Steelers cutting Connor would – That's like in a universe never to happen. 3rd-round pick, but and then Bell is Bell. Bell is probably might be the most likely to not be on here out of all of them, but I think he is. But anything to add for you?
Not really. The only thing I'll say about Davis and Toussaint is that they're both pretty good special teams players. I think Toussaint is probably a little more versatile in the fact that he plays all phases of special teams, but like we said, he's pretty much useless as a kick returner. And Davis is a electric kick returner, so that's something to look out for and be excited. But if Davis doesn't produce as a kick returner this year, we'll know that it's not just the returners who have been horrible for the past 5 years. It's been more like the blocking schemes and the coaching, so that will be something to look forward to as well. Wide receiver position, Austin and I also had 6 players each. And we had a little bit of a different list this time. You kept DeMarcus Ayers, and as much as I like DeMarcus Ayers, Austin, I just don't see any room on this roster for him. But why do you have him making the roster?
All right. So the reason I chose DeMarcus Ayers over Justin Hunter, Kobe Hamilton, or Darius Hayward Bay was his age and his cost, and it was mostly that. Is mostly Hunter and Darius Hayward Bay fighting for it because I think Hamilton's going to be the first one cut out of this wide receiver group. I really don't think he adds anything different that none of the other receivers can do. But I won't. It was so between Justin Hunter, DeMarcus Ayers, and Hayward Bay fighting for that spot. I think because of DeMarcus Ayers' age and cost, they stick with him here in a surprise pick over veteran Darius Hayward Bay and new free agent Justin Hunter. I've already voiced that I hate Justin Hunter. Not hate, but like I just don't see he's nothing more than Sammy Coates will ever be. Sammy Coates is younger, so I don't see his reason to be there. And him, Darius Hayward Bay, and Sammy Coates are all the same type of player, so I don't see them keeping all 3. I mean, I could see a reality where Darius Hayward Bay is kept, but I really don't see Justin Hunter or Kobe Hamilton definitely not being there. So why did you choose Darius Hayward Bay instead of DeMarcus Ayers?
Let me ask you something first. If DeMarcus Ayers makes this team, do you really think it's just on his receiving ability? Because I think if he makes it, it's going to have to be as a punt returner too.
I honestly think he could. I think we haven't seen enough of him. I would like to see more. But I think because of his age and cost is going to be enough to do it. Might not just be his receiving ability, age and cost.
Well, I'm really hoping that we get to see him too. It's tough because this is a very deep position for Pittsburgh, and I really want to see them keep 7, but there's just not enough balls to go around for this one. There's 11 receivers on the Steelers roster right now. 9 of them have either been a role player, a starter, or a high draft pick either this year or in years past. This is not going to be an easy group to cut down. Not that Kobe Hamilton is a superstar or anything, but the fact that he is probably one of the first guys that's going to get cut is kind of crazy considering how well he played at times last year. But looking at the guys I kept the one you mentioned, Darius Hayward Bay. The big thing that really kept wanted me to keep him over guys like Ayers or Justin Hunter is the fact that he really is a special teams ace. I think he's one of the best special teams players on the Steelers. He's been that for the last few years, and he also adds an added dimension as a speed guy. And yeah, the Steelers have a bunch of those guys, but he's also a really good blocker, and he's not like super cheap, but he's also not expensive either for the price. And I think he's just he gives you a little bit of everything as a receiver. And I think that's something that, even though it might be more exciting to see DeMarcus Ayers over him because of the potential of him, I think the Steelers are going to go with something safe here like Hayward Bay. But the rest of the receivers I have here are Brown and Bryant starting. In the slot, I have Juju Smith-Schuster and Eli Rogers, and I have Sammy Coates as the wild card just because I don't think the Steelers are ready to give up on him yet. I think this is probably his last year to make something happen. So we move on to the tight ends. We just talked about this group a little bit earlier in the show about how the situation appears to be dire, but the Steelers have their guys right now. They have three guys who have played in the NFL and 2 undrafted free agents. Go.
Okay, so I chose 3. My 3 are Jesse James. That was pretty much a given. David Johnson, which is pretty much a given too. I mean, that's, I guess, more of a questionable pick. But my last one was a kind of a surprise pick. I chose Scott Orndorff over Fazem Odom or Xavier Grimble. It's just, I really didn't think Grimble did enough to secure him a spot on the Steelers, and I think the Steelers would just rather take a risk with an undrafted free agent. Other than that, Jesse James' spot is locked as the number 1 catching tight end, which is kind of bad to say. It doesn't make me comfortable. And David Johnson makes it the best blocking tight end. I could easily see Xavier Grimble making this roster instead of Scott Orndorff, but I wanted to take a risk here. What do you have?
Well, to your defense, why not with these guys? I mean, are these guys really that much worse than what the Steelers have? Like, could they be that much worse, I guess? I mean, you hope not.
Nope.
But in any case, I went with 4 tight ends here. I had 3 originally, but when I finished counting them all up, I had one position player left, so I gave the extra one to tight end. Scary list. If Jesse James goes down, we're in trouble. He's a decent player, but probably not great. He's in the bottom half, in my opinion, of starting tight ends in the NFL, but he can do his job. That's good. Grimble's a receiving target and not a blocker, and David Johnson's the opposite. He's a blocker and not a receiver. That's about all they can do. The only good news about them is that they played most of last year as the main tight ends with Ladarius Green out most of last year, so there's the potential that they can do it again. The other practice squad guy I went with was, how do you say that name? Fasan Odom, I believe you say. I chose him over Scott Orndorff because nothing against Orndorff from Pitt. I enjoyed watching him play at Pittsburgh, but whenever he played, I never really felt like he stuck out to me as like a superstar kind of player. He was always solid, but never great on a Pitt team that was really average when he was there. So back to Odom. He's 6'8". That's pretty much all I have to say. I don't really know much about him or how good he is, but he went to Fordham, so he probably shouldn't be on an active roster for a couple of years, but his size gives him a fighting chance as a red zone target due to the horrible depth at this position. And I don't know if he can play like this, I really don't think that there's going to be much stopping him from being able to play. I don't have much confidence in the other guys above him outside of Jesse James, at least as a receiving target, I guess I should say. I think he'd be a good matchup problem to at least throw out there, maybe as a decoy every now and then, but we'll see. On the offensive line, this group was pretty straightforward. Austin, what do you got?
Uh, for the offensive line, it's pretty simple. It's Marquise Pouncey, David DeCastro, Ramon Foster, Alejandro Villanueva, Marcus Gilbert, B.J. Finney, Chris Hubbard, and Gerald Hawkins. That is 8. No surprises here, but everyone has earned their spot, I think. Maybe the Steelers surprise us and cut Villanueva if they can't work out a deal, but I doubt that happening. That is pretty much crazy talk. Do you have anything to add? I don't think there's much to say.
No, these are the guys. You got your starters and you have your 3 solid backups. All of them can play multiple positions. And Hubbard in particular grew last year. He went from someone who was probably a fringe player at best to someone who could step in and play a little bit at all the positions. And I really didn't think he had it in him, but he became a valued member of the offensive line. And this might be, Austin, this might be the best offensive line the Steelers have ever had. At the very least, it's one of the best offensive lines in certainly the Tomlin era. They'd never had good offensive lines before Todd Haley came in, so it's really something to enjoy watching. And they've all grown under the tutelage of Mike Munchak, the former Hall of Fame player for the Houston Oilers, now Tennessee Titans. But yeah, there really isn't much to say about this group. You hope injury doesn't strike them like it did a couple of years ago with Marquise Pouncey. But the good news is that they do have capable players behind. So we can move on to the other side of the ball now. And starting with the defensive line, there probably aren't many players that are going to play on the defensive line. You want to give me your list?
Yeah, I have 7. I have Cameron Hayward, Javon Hargrave, Stephen Tuitt, Tyson Alualu, I think that's how it said, L.T. Walton, Daniel McCullers, and Johnny Maxey. I think due to all the injury that plagued this group last year, they end up taking 7 just in case, with Maxey just barely making it in. And they don't really have anyone else with a lot of experience, so it makes sense that Maxey is the last one to squeeze in. There wasn't really any other name that I thought would make it, so that is why I took him at number 7. Everyone else was basically a lock. I mean, you could argue that Daniel McCullers maybe didn't make it and they took 6, or Johnny Maxey didn't make it and they took 6, but I think that was good. What do you have?
Well, yeah, the starters are clear cut. You got Cameron Hayward, Stephon Tuitt, and Javon Hargrave. You got the first man off the bench. It's Tyson Alualu. That's pretty clear cut. You have L.T. Walton, another backup. He's pretty clear cut. Daniel McCullers is the only person I think who might be some concern of him not making the roster, but at the same point, I'd find it really hard pressed to believe that the Steelers would only keep 5 defensive linemen. So I think he makes it for his final year in Pittsburgh. I don't see him being re-signed. And I decided to keep only 6 defensive linemen. Johnny Maxey was the other guy I was thinking who might be able to make the roster. But I mean, he's just probably another guy to me. I think the way that they bolstered the depth by signing Alualu this year, along with L.T. Walton, can hopefully aid this team. We're just hoping that there isn't a big injury to one of these guys, because there has been the last couple of years. So maybe keeping 7 is the way to go here, but time will tell. So we can move on to outside linebackers, a position that we all wanted the Steelers to address in the draft this year, and they did. Do you have the Steelers keeping both of their draft picks this year?
I have them taking James Harrison, Bud Dupree, T.J. Watt, Anthony Chico, and yes, both of them, Keon Adams. I think Adams makes the team. I've only heard good things. I really think he has the potential to beat Moats out first roster spot. He's a cheaper, younger guy, and I said that same thing for DeMarcus Ayers. I like the idea of cheaper and younger. They last longer, and if they're only average at best, why not go with the cheaper, younger one? He has potential to be greater. Anyway, Chicolo is a solid special teams contributor and is cheaper than Moats, so I really don't even think his spot is in question. Then, of course, I think Harrison, Dupree, and Watt are locks. There are no chance they're cut. So that is what I think. What do you have?
Well, the starters are Harrison and Dupree on week 1. Watt's the other guy that's going to be a lock. Outside of that, I have Arthur Moats and Anthony Chicolo, the final 2 guys in. I think Moats makes this team because of his experience as a player in general and his ability as a special teams player. And I know that he's one of Mike Tomlin's guys, if you will. So I feel like he's going to be staying at least for one more year. And I think Anthony Chickalo ends up beating out Keon Adams just because Chickalo really showed some nice things last year in the preseason before he got hurt. He showed the ability that he could actually become potentially a rotational defensive player instead of just a guy who's primarily a good special teams player, which he is. I think they're going to try to stash Keon Adams away on the practice squad, and maybe we'll see more of him next year. But for now, it's just the five: Harrison, Dupree, Watt, Moats, and Chickalo for me. Moving to the inside linebacker position, this position and tight end are really up for grabs as far as the depth problems here, Austin. Which position do you think has a worse problem, like a bigger problem with depth right now?
Uh, the worst problem, I think I'm gonna go with tight end. I gotta go with tight end. I really think tight end is the worst position here. Then inside linebacker, it's at least we have Ryan Shazier and Vince Williams to start. It's just tight end is just bad off the bat. Well, no offense to Jesse James, he's just not that good. He's not really good.
He's okay. He's okay. You know.
Ryan Shazier, I can say with easily that Ryan Shazier is good. I can say Vince Williams is pretty decent. He's okay as well. So it's just, I don't know. After that, it's quite the dump off. But with Steven Johnson, Tyler Matakevich, but it's bad. What do you think is the worst position, if I may ask?
Well, when I was asking you, I was going to say inside linebacker because there's two inside linebacker positions, but then I remembered that Ryan Shazier is a Pro Bowl level player when he's healthy, and Vince Williams has at times shown that he is, a pretty good NFL player. Obviously, he's a former sixth-round pick, and he's stuck around for a while for a few reasons. So, I'm confident that they can play as starters. I'm not confident they can play great, particularly Vince Williams, but at least they have starters I'm pretty confident in. Jesse James, I'm confident he can play well, but I'm not sure he's going to be much of an impact. Like, I see him catching maybe 40 passes, 4 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns. That's numbers below Heath Miller's, career average numbers per season. And I don't think it would be good of us to expect more from Jesse James. That's just how I feel. I mean, he's an okay player. He drops balls that he should catch, and he's not as good a blocker as you'd want him to be. He's decent all around, but not as great as you'd want him to be with any of them. So I'm going to say tight end is a bigger problem right now, but they're both not pretty good, they're both pretty bad. It's late.
Oh.
It's late, guys. It's now June 10th, guys.
Oh my god.
So, moving on to my list of the inside linebackers, I had Shazier and Williams as the starters. Obviously, I think you keep Steven Johnson. He's a pretty much a special teams ace. I like him a lot. And then I think the other guys you keep are Tyler Matakevich and L.J. Fort. And I'll be honest, I think these guys are, they play hard. They're good young players, but I'd much rather see them on the practice squad than the active roster. But I really don't think the Steelers have much of a choice right here. They're going to have to go with these guys, and hopefully they grow pretty quickly because there's a good chance they're going to have to play a lot next year because all it's going to take is one injury, and they're out on the field. So let's get away from that, and let's move on to the cornerback position, which has quickly been bolstered with the drafting of 2 more rookies and the signing of a free agent in Cody Sensabaugh. Who do you have making the roster as a cornerback?
For cornerbacks, I think easily number 1 is Artie Burns, and then Ross Cockrell, William Gay, Cameron Sutton, and Cody Sensabaugh. That would be 5. This was tough because I really wanted to give a spot to Brian Allen, but I think Sensabaugh's experience forgoes that. I think that the Steelers I don't think the Steelers will cut William Gay as some have rumored as being possible. The next issue at hand is Senquez Golson. I think the Steelers give up on him. 2 years and not even a bit of preseason play out of it. It sucks, but it's not worth it. It's not worth it to try anymore. He's a waste of a roster spot when you don't know what you're going to get. Artie Burns, Ross Cockrell, and Cameron Sutton are all locks to be on this team. Who Who do you think makes a team for cornerbacks?
Well, I have it the exact same way you do. I have Artie Burns and Ross Cockrell. Those are your starters, no doubt. Cameron Sutton's probably your main guy at slot cornerback. William Gay's probably your other one. And Cody Sensabaugh rounds it out with your special teams guy and depth player. The two question marks I have at this position, the wild cards, if you will, are Senquez Golson. And let's be honest, I think this is sad, but I think he's going to be injured this year as well. I mean, he's gotten through not even 2 full training camp practices in his NFL career, which is about to begin its 3rd year. I really hope he can play. I hope the coaches give him a chance. And the thing that's really concerning is that the coaches came out and basically said that anything the Steelers get from him now is essentially a bonus, and that's not something you really want to hear. So I'm not readily expecting to hear something really good about him, that he's all of a sudden going to become the starting slot guy. I hope he does, but I would not be surprised if he ends up getting cut this year. But I'm hoping. The other question mark is Brian Allen. And although I love his ability, there's a reason a lot of NFL scouts basically said he's not going to be ready to play in the NFL for a couple of years. And yes, the experts aren't always right, but he's just a raw talent right now. He's got a lot of skills that need fine-tuning, so I suspect he'll be stashed away on the practice squad this year, and that's really all I have to say about the cornerback. So moving on to the last defensive position, we have safeties, and Austin, we both kept the same amount this time.
Yep, 4. It's pretty easy. Mike Mitchell, Sean Davis, Robert Golden, Jordan Dangerfield. That's it. Not much to say about this group. Really, I think the only one who may not make it is Golden, but I think this whole group is just almost just a roster lock. It really doesn't feel like they would add another safety. It doesn't feel like they would cut one. It's how it is. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I kind of thought the Steelers don't typically keep that many safeties. I feel like it's weird. 4 seems like a weird number to me. I kind of feel like they either keep 3 or 5, I guess. But, the good news is that the starters are solid. Mike Mitchell's not great. I mean, he's a physical player. He hits hard. Sometimes he gets into penalty trouble. Didn't do that so much last year. Sometimes he will get beat because he is an aggressive player. I'm excited to see what Sean Davis is going to do next year. He said in an interview that last year, being his first year, he said it should be the worst year he ever plays. I like that mentality, and I'm excited to see what he can do because he did play well last year. Robert Golden, I have a feeling, is not going to be around much longer. He's more of a run stopper, doesn't offer much in coverage, but he's a good special teams player, and I suspect he'll be the first man off the bench. And Jordan Dangerfield is a young specialist only, so pretty straightforward at this position group. So lastly, we can move on to the specialists, and this one, so we're going to include kicker, punter, and long snapper, and I think it's tough because there have been some positions that have been really easy to pick, like quarterback or offensive line, but I really think this one is about as straightforward as it gets, Austin.
Oh, yeah, easily. It's going to be Chris Boswell, Jordan Berry, and Canada, easily. No, just kidding. Colin Holba, easily. You have to keep the future Hall of Famer on the team. Canada doesn't beat Holba out for the long snapping job, and if he does, there will be at least one very angry fan for it. I can promise you that. And the only time you ever really change kickers is when they get injured. Chris Boswell's a decent kicker, so he doesn't need to be changed, and Barry's a decent punter, so he doesn't need to be changed. And I thought actually Barry was probably Pro Bowl caliber for a lot of the last season, so no reason to change what's not broken. So what do you think?
Well, these men are going to receive the usual preseason position battle with a training camp body. And I don't like using that term. I don't like throwing it around often because these are people and they work very hard, and they are very good at what they do at most levels. But the fact of the matter is, unless if these guys are unexpectedly awful or they're injured, these are going to be the guys. Boswell is one of the best in the business, particularly from under 50 yards. Jordan Berry's pretty dependable, and like you said, he played like a Pro Bowler last year. I thought he faded a bit down the stretch, but I still thought he played pretty well. Case in point, he played a lot better in the playoffs last year. I remember the divisional round against Denver last year. He was pretty bad. And let's hope Colin Holba is the best thing since sliced bread, since we spent a sixth round pick on him. One would hope, anyways. But all kidding aside, that pretty much does it for that segment. Long segment there, but it was something that I felt like it would be worth talking about, something to get us back in the swing because we haven't talked Steelers in so long. But we have one little thing left to talk about. I wanted to add one thing in. So we're gonna have two little sections here. One, who is the last player you cut? Basically, who is the final person you had to say I can't add you to the team? He would have been the 54th player on the roster. Who is it?
I think it's Kobe Hamilton. I think they really would have wanted to take a seventh receiver, and probably would have been Hamilton, or maybe it could have been Hayward Bay, in my opinion. But since yours was different, I went with Kobe Hamilton. Who do you have?
I had Fitzgerald Toussaint. We already talked about how him and Niall Davis are pretty much serving the same role. I just would have liked to keep Toussaint because I think he's a solid running back, and you can never have too much help on special teams. Toussaint's one of my favorite Steelers, and I always hated that hearing about what happened after he fumbled in the playoff game in Denver and how upset he was and how he really didn't want that moment to define his career. And he's a good person, and I hope he gets another chance because when he does have the ball in his hands, he's not amazing, but he does impress me a little bit. So he was my last player out. So who is your last man in, the guy who just made it in on the Steelers roster for you?
I have undrafted free agent Scott Orndorff. That was the last guy in there. All right, I guess tight end is really, really weak. We need somebody, so come on in, buddy. That's basically how it goes. And how about for you?
For the exact same reason, I just had a different tight end in Fasan Odom. Not much to say. That position is a mess right now. I'm excited to see if we can actually be proven wrong on this particular matter. Unfortunately, we're not going to know for almost 2 months now until training camp starts, until what's actually going on. Maybe we can actually get down there and see some training camp. Something we'll have to talk about another time. But, hey, we'll see. Are you all set for today's episode, Austin?
Yep, I think I am.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, Steeler Nation, for joining us once again. No, it's been a while since we've been doing these episodes, but we hope to be getting back in the swing of things as we quickly approach football season. I know it's still a few months away, but before you know it, training camp will be here and the preseason will follow, and then of course, opening day. It's gonna be pretty exciting. We're less than 3 months away from it, so hang on to your hats. It's coming fast. So if you have any questions about the show or you have any feedback to give us or offer us, please email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook to get our news about our shows or any Steelers news that we will be posting, on Facebook, we are at Stronger Than Steel Podcast. And on Twitter, we are Stronger_Steel. Don't forget to check out our episodes on YouTube and SoundCloud under the name Stronger Than Steel Podcast. Austin, thank you so much for joining me tonight, and I'm glad we could get back to doing this. It's been a while, but I'm definitely glad we could get back into it today.
All right. I had a good time too, man. I really, really miss podcasting. So have a good night, everybody.
Alrighty. Good night, everybody.